Thank you for listening to the BjjBrick Podcast. We'll be bringing you Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and good times. We hope to flatten your Jiu-Jitsu learning curve, help you get the most out of your grappling ability, and meet your goals both on and off the mat.
Welcome back, my friends, to the BjjBrick Podcast. This is episode 344. We have a special guest from the world of law enforcement. His name is Richard Holt. He's coming at us with a lot of experience, and not just on the street, but also instructing defensive tactics as well. So I really look forward to getting him on the podcast, sharing some of his story, and really just help. I know we all train with different people from law enforcement, and just be able to see things from their perspective is super valuable, and he definitely shed some light on that. And Joe did the interview. Joe, you did great. We also have Gary here this week at a full house. Guys, I want to start the show off with a quote of the week here. No one can figure out your worth but you. And that was by Pearl Bailey. And I really like that. And I guess it goes both ways. You could feel like your self-worth is very low, or you could boost it up a little bit and feel a little bit better about that. But your self-worth is kind of an internal thing anyway. And people can help you build that. People can help you take it away. But ultimately, that's up to you. And I just remember talking with somebody a little bit about maybe not rolling with certain people sometimes. You know, if the role is not what you're looking for, if they're a little bit rude or a little bit rough, or maybe they smell funky, whatever the reason to not roll with Gary is, to just be able to say no, thank you. And it's just, some people have a hard time with that, and I think that that's something that is part of building that self-esteem and that confidence as a martial art, and not thinking of it like I'm wimping out or I'm declining a tough role, but just think, right now this role isn't right for me. I stand up for myself and I say no, thank you. Like that, I think there's a lot of value in that goes underestimated.
I agree, Byron. I like where you took that. Jiu-jitsu as a hobby, as a sport, as an activity we participate in, I think has a lot of potential to help build your self-worth. When I read the quote, though, the first thing I thought was that self-worth is just one of the many things about yourself that only you can determine. You know, take your vocation, for example. Are you fulfilled in your vocation? Only you can really make that determination. Somebody else can look at you and maybe you're working with your hands in a cabinet shop or something, and they think that you got to work behind a desk and have a white collar, and they're telling you, man, you could do so much better for yourself. You know what? Only you can decide if that's the right career for you. And if you're being fulfilled and you're paying the bills and you're challenged and you've got goals, then that's the direction you need to go. And the same is true for your jiu-jitsu journey. People are going to say, you got to compete. If you're not competing, you're not getting the most out of jiu-jitsu, or you need to be taking private lessons, or if you're really committed, you're going to every seminar in town. You know, everybody's path is different. And if you're going 2-3 times a week and progressing at a pace that you're happy with and you're enjoying it, then that's the right journey for you. And if you're going 5 times a week and you're hitting every seminar and every tournament in town and you're happy with it, then that's the right path for you. But only you can determine that.
Sure, I love it. I wasn't thinking of that way. I was thinking more Byron's way. But, you know, I thought the way you brought this is perfect. You know, too many people butt into other people's business and try to tell them, you know, their ideas, what they think they should be. You know, it kind of goes back to what Byron and I were talking about on the show last week, you know, when I wasn't happy and, you know, people told me jiu-jitsu had to be this and that. And, you know, I decided to go another way to be happy. You know, I follow Tom Blass on Facebook, and, you know, the guy to me is just a class act. I always see him talking about, you know, the makeup of his schools. You know, he's got the majority of them, just kind of like what you said right there, Joe, don't compete. He said he's even got a lot of people that don't even spar in class. They just show up. And, he's like, hey, everybody's got a different reason. Some people are here for this. Some people just want to do this. Some people want to be in the UFC. And I'm here for everybody. I'm not going to judge anybody. I'm going to let them do what makes them happy. And every time I see some quotes by him or some interviews by him, I'm just like, man, those people who train out there are lucky to have him as an instructor. But then I want to go back to the stuff Byron was talking about, that self-worth, that, people can build you up and people can also bring you down, but like you said, it's up to you to control yourself. But the other thing I see a lot that I love that jiu-jitsu does is we always help the underdog. There's always somebody being bullied in the United States, and a video gets passed around, and it goes on. And I know I've seen Tom DeBlas on there saying, "Hey, I'm going to train this kid for free. I'm going to fly him out there." And I just think the world would be so much of a better place if we didn't try to put our own personal opinions on other people and get them maybe feeling bad about themselves. If our goal of each and every one of us was just to brighten somebody's life, just put them on a pedestal, just say something good to a person each day, and that person just keeps hearing that over and over again. For these young kids, that just been beat up their whole life, it'll just make their life so much easier. And we've talked about schools that are great schools that build you up, and man, if you just had a school that just tried to build everybody up, and we didn't care if you were a world champion or if you're a guy who was absolutely the worst jiu-jitsu person ever, but you show up 2 days a week after work to train before going to pick up your kids from daycare. But I really like this quote. I just want everybody to feel good about themselves and have great self-worth.
Good stuff, guys. I really appreciate your guys' insight on that one, and just to maybe further explain what I was thinking. I think it happens more often with our female grapplers on the mat is maybe they're getting a weird vibe from somebody and they would rather not roll with that person, but they feel obligated. You could say no. I mean, that's definitely okay. You know what? I'm going to sit out this round, and I hope to roll with Joe next time. That's pretty easy. Actually, it's not. If it was pretty easy, everyone would be able to do that. But it's you have to tell yourself you could do it, and then you have to do it. Same thing with maybe the kids' competition team. Maybe coach is putting a lot of pressure on some kids or some people to compete. Standing up to that person may seem kind of awkward, but standing up for what you want to do with your life is I hate to say it, but sometimes a coach could be kind of a bully. They want to get a big competition team together. They're pushing everybody, and they're kind of bullying people a little bit. Maybe, this isn't typical, but I can see this some kids being pushed harder, or some parents being pushed harder for the kids. Like, hey, we want to get 100 kids on the comp team or whatever. I guarantee you, some of those kids would rather not. Some of those parents would also rather not, and they're just kind of being pushed. So, there's bullies at work. Somebody just kind of not necessarily physical bullies, but just kind of controlling you a little bit emotionally or where you want to go. And sometimes it happens on the mat and people don't even realize it. But yeah, we got to stand up for ourselves, guys.
Yeah, I think what you're saying, Byron, is that you need to, or people need to recognize that they have enough worth and enough value that they can determine their own path. They can roll with who they want to roll with. They can compete if they want to. I think that's a really good point. I'm glad you came back to that.
Good, because I felt like I was rambling.
No, you did good. I like that.
Because I wasn't really thinking of it that way. I was thinking of people getting beat down. And, I do think there's the adverse of that, too, or opposite of it. People get beat down so much that I do think sometimes that just on your own, you can't get back there. You need help, professional help. You need help from other individuals. If you get beat down long enough and, you just get in that deep, dark despair, and it's hard to pull yourself out. And, I can go back to a time in my life when I wasn't feeling great. And I'm not jiu-jitsu related, but, I had people tell me I needed to see, people close to me like, hey, man, you need to see, talk to somebody, some psychologist or whatever, psychiatrist, whatever they're called. And, I'm like, no way, I'm tough. I can control all this myself. And, it didn't work. I ended up going to see somebody, best decision I ever made. But sometimes I don't think you can pull yourself out of those dumps, that dump by yourself. I think you need teammates, you need professionals, you need people helping you along that way too. And I think that's what's so great about jiu-jitsu, because we can also be there to help that person, give them positive reinforcement to get them so they are at that position where they will have that, self-worth, and, hopefully they can, turn the other cheek. And then if it just keeps getting so bad, then they can choke the other cheek, choke the other neck, or whatever you want to call it.
Oh, Gary, you're always dealing with cheeks.
Way to drag it back on the mat, Gary.
No, but there is value in having. There's dichotomy here. There's value in your coach pushing you a little bit and getting you to be outside your comfort zone. Like, I'm not saying don't do that, but if you've competed 7 times and it sucked all 7 times, and coach wants you to go to number 8, coach, I'm sitting this out, man. That's pretty. If coach thinks you should go compete, it's your first time, or maybe you did it once and it didn't go super well. I mean, they're probably pushing you to help you grow and develop as a person and as a martial artist. So there's definitely it's not black and white here. So
yeah, we're all unique individuals, and different paths we're going to follow.
And good one there, Gary. And it's really amazing that there could be an audio book that could help you with your jiu-jitsu, considering that we're all unique and we all have different games that we implement and work from. But I tell you this much, 6 Training Games for BJJ is just an audiobook. I'm just going to talk to you about how you roll, what you're doing while you roll, and it will help you get better at jiu-jitsu. I'm not showing you a bunch of techniques. I'm not doing anything like that. It's just I'm going to help you maybe change a few of the parameters, maybe some of the goals that you have while you're rolling, and it's going to teach you stuff about your own unique game. It's an audiobook. It's $5.99. The money goes to help support the show. It's about an hour long. It's kind of like a podcast, and it's gonna change the way you roll when you want it to, and it's going to teach you about your own game. So check it out there, my friends. There'll be a link to the shop in the show notes, or you can just go BjjBrick.com and look for the shop button, and it'll pop right up, and you could shop for it in the shop. And
shop.
And Gary still has his items in the shop as well, selling bricks straight out of his house. I put that on there like a long time ago. I forgot it was on there.
Forgot about it.
Oh yeah.
Maybe somebody will buy one.
Yeah, hoping somebody buys. Sell them all at the same time. I guess that would be interesting.
Yeah,
and a real estate transaction happens
over
a jiu-jitsu.
Yeah.
I somehow swindle Gary's house right out from underneath him.
That would not surprise me. The jokes you guys play on me, they go episode to episode.
That's a bit extreme.
Pretty soon, in about 2 more episodes, you guys are going to send me an electronic quit claim deed to sign, and next thing you know, you guys got my house. So I could see it happening.
Yeah, he's.
I'll be alert from now on.
He's alert for now, but we'll just distract him a little bit here. Guys, I wanted to bring a quick off the mat lesson here. We hit the quote pretty hard there, but for the first time in my, I guess, adult life, I took an item to be dry cleaned. Not a person who wears fancy clothes, evidently, my friends. So I took it in, and it was just a little dry cleaning place next to the grocery store I go to. And I walk in, and she goes, "What's your name?" I give her my name. She goes, "Oh, you're not in our system." I said, "No." And then she goes, "Oh, you're a new customer." She pulls out, she goes, "I have a gift for you." I'm like, what? She gave me a little gift. It was like a box of candy and some coupons. And then she goes, "I also have this." She gave me a garment bag to put my stuff in. When I come in next time, it'll already be labeled when I walk in the door. And super friendly, and really felt like she was... she didn't need to be pushy. I'm already in the store. I'm wanting my clothes cleaned anyway. But like that was the best welcoming of a new customer experience I've had in a long time. It was like, "Hey, I've got this for you. Hey, check this out. It's gonna be ready this day." Just like as a new customer and as a person who has never had anything dry cleaned before that I could remember anyway, I didn't really know what I was doing. She took care of all that stuff. Made it super easy, super friendly, and I'm just thinking, how much more intimidating is it to go in and try jiu-jitsu at a new gym for the first time than it is to go get a pair of pants dry cleaned? Like, you can't compare the two. So anything you could do to make the gym more open, more friendly, adding value to the customer experience, even just as fellow students. If coach is busy and a little tied up, if you could talk to the person, be friendly, and explain things a little bit, man, I guarantee your coach is gonna be happy if you do a good job at that. Not if you bomb it, that's a little different. But just be yourself, be friendly, be welcoming, and you don't have to give a gift of a box of candy or anything like that. But just that first experience is so important for businesses to do well. And I like that. I think, this place wants me to be their permanent customer, and they did as much as they could to earn that today. Now I haven't got my clothes back yet, but I just took them in this afternoon. So, but it's just, I was just impressed with how their operation went. And I was like, man, jiu-jitsu should be doing this. And some gyms do it better than others, but it's also a thing that some students, and not all students are equally good at this. Some people are just more naturally friendly. Some people are just more outgoing. We all have different levels of ability here. But if you see the opportunity and you help out your gym with that, that's going to be great long term for the gym.
Yeah, good customer service goes a long ways. We've talked about this before, that obviously the gym owner is, creating a business, and the job of creating the business falls on his shoulders. But as teammates, I feel like we're creating a team, and I feel like we all kind of share a little bit in this. And when new people come in the door, greet them. If you roll with them, make sure they get a good roll. If they're brand new, help them out. They don't know how to tie their belt. They don't know where to line up. They don't know the moves that you're doing for the warm-ups. Whatever you do to help them out. Building the school, building the business falls on the coach, but we're building a team, and I think we all have a part to play in that.
Joe.
Yeah,
I feel like you should type that up as a quote. The gym owner is, building a business. As a team member, we're helping to build the team. Man, Joe Thomas, BjjBrick, that should be like a quote that people would be passed around all over the internet about jiu-jitsu.
I'll work on it.
Did he win the internet with that, Gary?
Right.
No, I just think what won the internet this week is just me thinking about the lady at the dry cleaning store right now walking around with Byron's pants on. She's actually wearing it. That's what I'm thinking of.
Nobody looks good wearing my pants, Gary. So
they're a little size different, but hey, as long as you're happy with them, Byron.
Hey, I don't know what's normal operations for a dry cleaning place. If that's what they do, I wouldn't know any different. So, Joe, what did we expect during the interview here?
Man, we had a good conversation, Richard Holt and I. We have Richard Holt. He's a longtime law enforcement officer with many years of experience behind him in law enforcement, many years of experience behind him in martial arts. And he wrote an article for us entitled "Why Officers Don't Train." So we had a good conversation about that. I don't know that there's an easy solution, but he identified a couple of kind of core issues that they need to face. And then we talked a little bit about his 1-year journey to Master Worlds, I believe. So he's got a big tournament coming up, and he's about halfway through a year's worth of training for that. So appreciate Richard Holt coming on. Let's roll the interview.
All right, BjjBrick listeners, I'd like to welcome to the show Richard Holt. Richard is a police officer with many years of experience, focusing specifically on training for conflict on the streets, and he's a trainer type of guy. He's also a jiu-jitsu guy who's preparing for a tournament coming up. So we're going to talk a little bit about an article that he wrote for us, why officers don't train, and then we're going to talk a little bit about his 1-year challenge for his tournament. But before we do that, Richard, how about a brief introduction?
Sure. I'm a 25-year veteran of the Rapid City Police Department, self-instructor for 20 years. Been through a number of different systems, studied a number of different martial arts myself, and I'm currently a blue belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, having been training for 3 years.
Okay, nice. So we're going to start off talking about this article that you wrote for us. But before I do that, let me ask you what first attracted you to law enforcement? When did you know you wanted to be a police officer, and how did you come to do that?
You know, Joe, I went to college, not sure what I wanted to do, went through a number of different things, and figured I had certain gifts. I'm a bigger guy. I'm 6'6", 235 pounds, and I believe I have a certain amount of discernment and problem-solving skills, and I wanted a job that would not only challenge me, but also that I could make a difference in the society and the world in which I live. And found law enforcement to fit all those aspects of what I was looking for.
So I'm wondering, I didn't have this as a question, but as you're talking, I'm wondering where you grew up, how you grew up, and if anything, like when you were a kid, if that had any bearing on why you wanted to be a cop, or what kind of cop you wanted to be, or what you wanted to do specifically in law enforcement.
Well, I grew up in Minneapolis, and summers I spent out at my parents had a lake home, and I spent my summers out there. And interesting enough, got to know a retired state highway patrol officer. And being a young teenager, he would take me out fishing on a regular basis, and through him just learned the importance of making a difference in the society and being responsible in the career and what it entails.
Man, I didn't know we were going to end up going here, but man, that's a good example of, leadership of one man rubbing off on another with some quality life lessons, and that's
right? It just goes to show you never know when you invest yourself in our youth the difference that you make down the road. I went on to college and didn't have as much contact with him. But eventually that's the route I chose, and he was an instrumental part of that.
Sure. So he's almost got to double his career, and maybe he had that same impression on some other young men, and so his legacy has got to continue on.
Absolutely.
Nice. Hey, so since we're going to talk a little bit about why police don't train and the importance of training in some sort of combat art, and I think we both agree jiu-jitsu is a good place for that, but since we're going to talk about that, what was your pre-job training like?
So I actually studied Goju-Ryu under an instructor in Minnesota for about a year before I got the job as a police officer. And once I got the job, it was the standard cookie cutter system that was being promoted at the time, and is in many ways still promoted today within other agencies, where you have a 40-hour course, 8 hours a day, and then they bless you and say you know what you're doing. At our department, we trained at the time using the same system. We trained every year for 8 hours. You had an annual training where you refreshed yourself on the techniques, maybe incorporated some training, some new techniques, but generally it was pretty much the same every year. And that was probably for the first 10 years of my career, even as an instructor. As an instructor, I went to an instructor school, which was a 40 hours, 8 hours a day, do this, do that, response to stimulus. The guy resists, does this. And then you're an instructor. And I have to be honest that I did not train my martial arts for the first part of my career, but I was, a fit 24, 25-year-old police officer. Now, I worked out on a regular basis. I did triathlons and ran marathons and kept myself in great shape, but I didn't train my defensive tactics like I probably should have.
Yeah, that's interesting. We'll get into that whole idea a little bit more later when we get into your article. When you were doing that early training, did they train you at all? Oh, let me back up a little bit. The karate that you did, that was separate? That's something you did yourself? And was that in preparation to be a police officer?
It was. I had an instructor at the University of Minnesota Mankato, Bill Lewinsky, he was a law enforcement instructor and was a black belt in Goju-Ryu, and invited me, somebody who I respected, and invited me, explained to me the benefits and how that would benefit me as a police officer. And so for about a year, I trained with him in Goju-Ryu. But then when I actually got the job, life gets in the way, and I didn't really feel the need for it like I should have, should have recognized.
At the time, or looking back on it, how would you rate the year's worth of karate training compared to the 40 hours and the once a year kind of thing that you got from the police force? How would you compare those two experiences for preparing yourself to be an officer?
Well, I think in my case, the law enforcement training really supplemented my karate training that I did. I certainly would not have wanted to have been an officer with no experience and then relied on this 40 hours of training to keep myself safe. What
year are we talking about roughly, Richard?
I started my career in law enforcement in 1994. Okay,
and so how prevalent was grappling in this type of training back then?
There's none. There was the concept was you stayed on your feet. Now, to preface this, I did wrestle into high school and a little bit into college, so I had a wrestling background as well that served me in my career.
Okay. So just a little more of your own background before we get into the article. I was wondering, do you remember your first physical confrontation, or do you have any sort of general takeaways from some of the early physical altercations you had on the street?
There are scrambles. Generally, I didn't really come up against anybody with any skill set. So using my wrestling, my Goju-Ryu, the training I got at the police department, and my size and physical abilities, I was able to control most people without too much effort.
That's interesting, because my next question is, how about maybe some more recent scraps, and how much has the your, I guess, the skill level of the other guy changed? Has it changed over the last 20 years?
It has, and the violence. I think we have, to a certain extent, I see more people resisting or fighting with police now than when I first started my career. Many of the people we will deal with have felonies already hanging over their head that are pending in court, and they really don't have anything to lose by fighting. So I've seen an escalation of force on the offender side or the suspect side, but at the same time, I know there's a number of occasions, one of them a year ago, October, where I have no doubt that my training in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu saved my life.
How's that? Can you elaborate a little bit?
A suspect in a domestic violence situation was outside the back door. I confronted him. He tried to flee. I threw him to the ground. What I didn't realize when I brought him to the ground is he drew a sword.
Oh, my goodness.
So when he gets up, I'm behind his shoulder, and the first I see the sword is it's in his hand, and it's plunging towards my stomach. One of the things, as you know, in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is its ability to make tactical decisions under a stressful situation. And so, I think I was in so close, I was right off his shoulder, that I don't think I could have drawn my gun without being stabbed by this sword, impaled. And so I decided, okay, if I get impaled, I'll draw my gun. But what I did instead is I stepped into his back and did a sacrifice throw, brought him over and slammed him to the ground. And he subsequently lost the sword, and I was able to control him, taking a mount position and maintain control until the officers could get there. But being able to make that tactical decision and being able to even execute the throw all came from the training that I'm doing is Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and not panicking in that moment.
Man, that's a great anecdote. Yeah, the making hard decisions in stressful situations is key. And, of course, having the ability to do that sacrifice throw. And like you say, you did wrestling when you were younger. So just years and years and years of repeating the same types of motions. Then you can do that at a snap in a conflict.
Right.
So before we talk about your article, that was good background. Love hearing those stories about your early days in the force. But before we talk about your article, tell me a little bit about the current role that you play, because you do some instructing within the police force, correct?
Right. So I'm a chief defensive tactics instructor. Since probably within the last 10 years, we have gone to a martial arts-based defensive tactics program. A lot of it's based on the strikes and kicks are based on Chandaquan Taekwondo. I do have a black belt in Taekwondo, Chinese Kempo, Krav Maga, and more recently, in the past 2 years, we've added a lot of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu as my skill levels have increased. My portion as a chief instructor, I lead most of the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu training, showing officers how to use techniques and position to control people and gain an advantage. As a chief, I also, we go through and I'm fortunate in the department that I work for, and that with body cameras, we'll go through and look and see what's happening on the street. For example, we had an officer who gained mount on a subject but didn't know how to maintain it and ended up in a struggle for his taser. So we looked at that video, and then the next time we had in-service, next time we did training, we worked on mount control. The instructors, we also get together on a weekly basis and train Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu with all the instructors and officers who are interested, just to provide that training so that it's available.
Nice. I've got a couple of highlights here on your article I want to ask you about, but before we do that, this is just based on something you just said. Sometimes traditional martial arts get a bad rap, and I've always felt that every martial art has something to offer. I want to give you a few minutes to defend Taekwondo. Talk about the Taekwondo that you've studied and the benefits that you see and how it works for you.
Sure. So I studied at Chandaquan Taekwondo, which is one of the early Taekwondo systems, and it's not a sparring or a sport-oriented school. It was very much a combat-oriented school, which does make a difference. People ask me what's the best art to train if you're going to train, and I really believe that the best art to train at is the one that you're going to attend.
Absolutely. Yeah, good point, man.
There's a lot of advantage to Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, but if you're not going to go, if you don't like it, if you don't enjoy it, you're not going to go, and there's not going to be any benefit. Taekwondo, traditional Taekwondo, has some of the same focus, some of the same disciplines, some of the same muscle memories, and you have to be able to know how to throw a punch, how to have control, how hard you can hit somebody. If I'm dealing with an elderly person trying to control and I have to strike them, I'm maybe not going to strike them with much force as I do a 20-year-old. So it's that control in combat that makes a difference regardless. But at the same time, the techniques you learn have to be practical, have to be realistic. If all you know is a form and one-step sparring, which is a gentleman throws a punch and then you do 3-4 moves on that person as they hold their arm out, that's not realistic because nobody's going to throw a punch and hold it out there. But if you put on some gear and practice sparring, strikes and kicks in a dynamic situation, then I would argue that whatever art you train in is going to have an advantage in a conflict.
I absolutely agree. I appreciate that because, we can't put all traditional martial arts into a singular basket, and there's a lot to offer. So in your article, I highlighted a few sections, and the first one, and you already touched on this, which is awesome, but I want to talk a little bit about the training methodology. You said, I have seen all manner of violence. I fought with countless suspects, defended myself against clubs, knives, swords, and have been shot at. So you already told us about the sword incident, but what I'm curious about is maybe a little bit about how an officer's training would be different than many other people's training because of the additional threats that are involved.
I think the big thing for an officer is the control principle of the art of a subject. You know, the vast majority of the people who resist are trying to get away. When I was studying Taekwondo, you know, if somebody wanted to fight, actually attack me, I was very comfortable in dealing with that person. But if somebody, their only goal in resisting was getting away, that person is very hard to deal with. And so for an officer training in a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu or a wrestling or a control tactic where you're just controlling that person, there's immense amount of value in that. I think you need to be able to defend yourself against punch and kicks, and you need to know how to punch and kick. But the big thing is the ability to control a person with minimum effort. We don't want to hurt these people, but at the same time, we have to control them. You know, if you were on the street as just not a police officer and got into a fight, you could be held accountable if you injure somebody, but you're trying to defend yourself. As a police officer, you're under a much greater scrutiny of your actions and the amount of force you use. You have to make decisions in moments, only to have those decisions be scrutinized, you know, under a non-stress situation by the general public.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, and I think that's one of the reasons why grappling is a must in your arsenal, because, you know, you've heard the term, if you're a hammer, then every problem looks like a nail. Well, right. if you're routinely in conflict situations and your only tools are punches, if you're a boxer, then every situation ends up like a prize fight, and it's much better if you control the guy without knocking his teeth out.
Right.
So how about your own weapon? As a police officer and in the training that you do with your guys, how much time do you spend, and where does jiu-jitsu come in when it comes to like retention of your weapon?
You know, we practice that as instructors on a regular basis, but the techniques that we learn in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu apply to weapon retention. You know, we were just this morning reviewing, when we trained this morning, we were reviewing a Kimura from a guard position. Well, so if I'm on the ground and someone reaches for my gun, instead of grabbing that arm and trying to pull it away, possibly pulling my gun out of the holster, I can apply a Kimura and force that arm up and back and gain control, just like in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And it's awareness. Weapon retention is about awareness of your gun and the other person. And Jiu-Jitsu certainly is part of that because, you know, my instructor says many times you have to pay attention to not just what the hand is doing that's on around your neck, but what's the other hand doing that's going to make it worse. So that awareness of your opponent, their movements, how their body's positioned, plays every role in weapon retention.
Right. So that I imagine is a pretty big part of all of your training with your officers.
It is. It is. But if I can control somebody, you know, if I can take them to the ground and control them where they don't have an opportunity to get to my weapon, that's ideal.
Nice. Okay, so topic of the article is why don't officers train martial arts? And you start out, after the brief introduction that we've just covered, with two sort of myths, or I don't know if they're myths, but people claim that this is why. Maybe excuses is the right word. And
that would be the right one.
And the first one is the training costs too much. And you are the right person to address this in this manner because you are an officer, but you're brutally honest about this. Why don't you go ahead on it?
Officers don't make a lot of money. At best, we're middle class. And to spend $60 to $100 a month on training seems like a lot of money, when you have kids and a family. But in reality, I do see it's a matter of what you value, because I see officers make that complaint and then they'll spend a $1,500 on a new firearm, a new toy, or they'll buy a boat or other things that they'll spend their money on, and it's just what their value. So, I've heard this excuse when you offer free training, and several people have commented on this. You offer free training, nobody values it, and nobody shows up. But at the same time, an officer who complains about training and spends $1,500 on a new firearm or $150 on a new knife that would pay for a month of training, they're fooling themselves. They could have the money if they really valued what was offered to them.
Yeah, so that's kind of a hard reality, but, that's true outside of law enforcement, too. I can't tell you how many people I've known that have started jiu-jitsu, and then one of the reasons they quit is because of the cost, but they're not going homeless. They're just spending their money on other things. So
right. And they'll go out and spend $100 or $150 at a bar on one night, and it's nice to go out for a meal and spend that money, take the family out, and that's important too. But at the same time, that training is just as important. You need to value that just as much as you do those other things in life.
Yeah, for a law enforcement officer. The guys I know, just your average Joe comes in the gym and decides, I'd rather spend my money on something else. That's up to him. But for people in your line of work, it's a matter of life and death.
It is. It can be. Yeah. Right.
So that was kind of myth or excuse number one. And in my opinion, and you address this later, and you've got some more insight on this, but in my opinion, there should be money in the budget to help guys with this. I know that's not the complete answer to just give them money, but in my community, if there was a bond measure brought up to just for training for officers, I would support it 100%.
And most schools, and let's be honest, most schools, if you're a student and you're there and you said, I'm kind of struggling, making ends meet, can you help me out? They're willing to help you out, especially if you're law enforcement, because in my experience, most professors or black belts or school owners fully support law enforcement and see the need and would rather have you there in the gym working on staying safe.
Our school actually, and I'll throw a shout out to my school, it's Brazilian top team, Lake Jackson. Actually, for a long time, has had a law enforcement trains free on Wednesday. That's our no-gi day. If you're in any kind of law enforcement in the Lake Jackson area, that's available to you. And like you said, I think most coaches, if you came in and said, look, I'm a police officer, I don't have time and money for regular classes, can I do a private once a month or something? I think most schools will work with you.
I would agree with you on that.
Great. So we just blew that excuse out of the water. The next one is maybe a little more difficult to blow out of the water. And you talked about training takes too much time. Tell me a little bit about the average day, week, a month in a police officer's life. A lot of hours, a lot of weird schedules.
Oh, yeah. We work 24 hours a day. There's officers out in their streets on keeping their community safe 24 hours a day. In my case, we work 10-hour shifts. But my job's seldom done after those 10 hours. Maybe I'm involved in a serious crime or a significant event on investigations. I've worked 16-hour days, gone home, slept in my uniform, and got up to go to my next shift. We also have court responsibility. If you're on night shift, court is in the middle of the day, judges don't come in at night to hear your case. And so you're constantly switching your patterns of sleep. Many departments are short, and you have overtime shifts or extra duties that you're working to make ends meet. And it's not unusual for me to put in 60-hour weeks on a regular basis. So finding time for family, social obligations, and then to train martial arts can be difficult. And, Rapid City is a relatively small community. Classes are only offered at certain times. And so finding that time to train can be very difficult.
Yeah. So at the end of this segment, I'm going to ask you a little bit about, solutions and problem solving, and we can address that at that time. But in my mind, of the two quote unquote excuses that you referenced, this is probably the more difficult one because, man, if you're a police officer and you've got 2 or 3 kids, it sounds like your day's pretty well taken up.
It is. But I think the key is what is your purpose in training? If I'm training for a competition, well, yeah, I need to be at training, 3-4 times a week at minimum. But if I'm in training to improve my survival skills, if I can make class once a week, that is going to increase my odds of survival and improve my skills.
And that's where the negotiating or talking to the coach or the gym owner is so important. When I first started training jiu-jitsu, I didn't have the money really to train, and I did just that. I walked into the instructor and I said, this is what you're charging for a month. Most people come 2 or 3 times a week. I can really only come once a week. My time is short and my money's short. What can you do for me? And he charged me about a half a month's rent. He's a friend of the show, Nick Unander, and a little while after that, I'm like, I'd like to come more, but I still don't have the money. I was a commercial fisherman. I'm like, can I trade you some Dungeness crab and seafood?
Right.
And so there's a way. I mean, if you're a law enforcement officer, there might be a jiu-jitsu coach in town that's interested in having some having some active shooter drills, and you can trade your services for training. There's all kinds of options. Don't be afraid to talk to the coach.
And if you have a skilled instructor in your defensive training program, they're not going to turn you down if you say, hey, can we spend an hour working on this? Would you mind training with me or rolling with me? They have time limitations as well, but most instructors are going to make that happen if an officer were to express an interest in it.
Absolutely. So the money argument's pretty easy to blow out of the water. Let's talk about
the time argument.
Yeah. Let's talk about the 2 reasons that you think are more likely to actually blame for officers not training. And I want to read from your article on the first one. I believe there are 2 underlying reasons. First, they don't recognize the need to train. New officers are taught you have to be ready to defend yourself. They come to believe there is a situation waiting for them, a situation which will challenge their ability to survive, and if they fail, they will die. They emerge from the academy, from their training, tactically sharp. They are ready for any test waiting for them. However, that test doesn't come. They arrest people on a daily basis, and it becomes routine. Even when a suspect resists or fights with them, they are able to use the skills they already have to control the person and gain compliance. They're given all these tools, pepper spray, tasers, batons, which help make up for any deficiencies in their defensive tactic skills and give them an edge. They don't train because the test never comes, and they have come to believe they're able to handle themselves in every situation. So they develop a false sense of security because their first handful of initial conflicts go well, and they think that it's going to just continue on that way. Is that a correct understanding of what you said?
That's correct. In my 25 years, and I've made thousands of arrests and fought with countless people, I can honestly say I've really only been in 3 fights, a fight being defined as one that you don't know if you're going to win. And so in 25 years, I can say I've really only faced that test on 3 occasions. So it doesn't happen very often. And so officers deal with people, struggle with people, are able to gain control. And so they don't see the need to train because they've never really had to face a true fight.
Yeah, and one of the things I think you alluded to throughout the article is that part of what makes you successful in those early days is you're 23, 25, 28 years old. You're in the best shape of your life. You're fresh out of your initial training. And so you have those advantages going for you. But eventually you're 40 years old and you're not the better fit athlete in the contest. Is that kind of part of what you get at with this?
It is. Because, in most cases, working patrol, and I've spent most of my career on patrol, it's a sedentary job. You have long periods of boredom punctuated by moments of sheer terror when you have to react. But you sit in a patrol car or you go out and you walk around, and it's a sedentary career in a lot of ways, but yet you're demanded to perform at a very high level in a moment's notice. And so, that sedentary lifestyle takes a toll after 15 years of working in patrol.
That's interesting. Another question that wasn't on my list. Is there any training you can do or any training that you do to help officers be able to flip that switch? Because that might not be easy all the time. You go from a routine encounter with somebody to a life or death struggle in an instant. Well,
to be honest, there's no teacher like experience. You have one situation where that situation changes dramatically and you don't forget it. Probably one of the hardest things to teach new officers is how things go from everything's fine to this is terrible in just the drop of a hat. And that's hard to explain, and you can tell people that, but sometimes until they experience it, they don't realize it. And when it does happen, you just kind of build that into your career.
Is there another side question here? Is there kind of a washout ratio? Is there a percentage of people that, they face that and they immediately want to transition to another position in the force or off the force altogether?
Right. We lose a lot of officers because they don't really understand the realities of what we do and what we face. Cop shows are fun to watch. They're interesting, but they're not reality. And unfortunately, a lot of people's perception is based upon what they see on television. And once they face the reality, we do lose officers because of that.
Yep. So that's unfortunate. And I guess, like you say, there's no way to really prepare them for that. But it is a reality. Not everybody's cut out for that.
Right.
So your first legitimate reason why officers don't train, or one of your core problems, is that they don't think they need to. They've got a false sense of security. And the second is the need to protect their ego. And this is unique to your field, I think. And I want again to read from your article. It says, brings us to the second and perhaps most important lesson or reason law enforcement officers don't train: ego. Every officer, no matter their age or physical condition, has to be confident in their ability to handle themselves. And then I'm skipping a few lines, and you write, if an officer doesn't believe they can handle a physical conflict, they have also accepted they can't do the job.
That's right.
So that's like, so you go into a jiu-jitsu class and you get dominated by a 150-pound blue belt 2 nights in a row, and you immediately start to question your ability to handle yourself in a physical conflict, and that can actually be a career ender for a cop.
It could. Most of the time what happens is they don't put themselves in that situation.
Right. They protect themselves from having that ego threatened.
Right. They may go in once or twice, and then they'll make excuses that, well, that's not real, or that's just in that situation. And they protect themselves in their ego, and so they won't go back in and train. It's hard to face your failure and then go back and face it again and again. And for a police officer, we don't have a choice. When there's a conflict, when there's a struggle, when there's someone being assaulted, we have a moral obligation, a legal obligation to go into that situation and deal with it. And if we don't have the confidence to do that, boy, it's going to be a struggle to be an officer. And when you go into a martial arts school and find that you can't keep pace, that's a blow to that ego. And sometimes they don't want to accept that, and they just won't go back.
Okay, so let's wrap this up with some solutions. You talk a little bit about it at the end of the article. What can we do to start to turn this trend around?
Well, I think we need to somehow get officers training on a regular basis. The cookie cutter defensive tactics systems have a place. They give some officers some skills, but we can move beyond that. Training once a year is not enough. What we really need to do is to show them that they do need the training, however we do that, whether through demonstration, by having them roll with somebody, by having someone train. And the other is the importance to do it on a regular basis. We have to make the training available. Invite them to classes, show them when they can make the classes, offer that training. We're working at our department right now. We're working on offering training at the department, having a mat where at the end of their shift, they can go roll for an hour with an instructor and work on some of those skills. And it doesn't have to be anything, as a matter of fact, it shouldn't be anything complex, but just basic defensive tactics skills, how to get away from somebody mounted you, how to stand up in a tactical sense, and to provide that training. Like I said, it doesn't do any good to make a horse thirsty if there's no water to drink. And so I think it depends upon us, officers, certainly senior defensive tactics officers, those who have experience, to emphasize the importance of it, and then to provide the training, have that training available for those officers.
Yeah, and I don't know if there's challenges within the police force that would make this not as true as I think it is, but if you had a training space, once you get a few people where they're at blue belt or purple belt level, the instructor becomes a little less important, because I know you've got maybe an instructor on the force and his time is limited. But once you get some guys at blue and purple belt, you can always say, look, I'm worried about getting, shoulder tackled on the streets. I want to work on my takedowns and my takedown defense. You just get another guy and go to the training room and work on it for an hour.
And utilize, body cameras are pretty prevalent nowadays. Utilize video from your department. Both those that show situations where officers make good decisions and use good technique to control someone, and where maybe they could use different techniques, and show them, hey, did you think about doing this? Here's what you maybe need to work on, and help those officers see what techniques are available.
Absolutely. Before we transition off this and onto your training for your tournament, what's kind of a minimum training plan you would look for officers? If there's some young officers or some small departments throughout the country, if somebody listens to this, how many times a week, what do they need to be doing? What's sort of the minimum they can do that's going to be moving them in the right direction?
I really think a minimum, if you could start at an hour a week with just some basic control techniques, an hour a week would make a tremendous difference in your training. And it doesn't have to be all on the ground. It can be, when was the last time you practiced throwing that kick? When was the last time you practiced punches or transport techniques? Just taking an hour a week would immensely improve your survival, chances of survival.
Nice. So if you're listening to this and you're a law enforcement officer or you know somebody that is, man, try and direct them to a good gym, encourage them to do some training or, get in and do some training.
And it's that consistency too. You can't do that hour a week, once a month. It's the long run. It's training on a regular basis that keeps those skills sharp and tactical.
Yeah, I think the less times you're doing it per week, the more important it is that you don't have big gaps in your training. Because an hour a week for 3 weeks and then a month off is not going to be much benefit. It's better than nothing, but
it's not going to be what you really need.
Yes, exactly. All right, Richard. So we'll transition from that. And hey, I really appreciate your insight on that. Law enforcement and training is something I'm interested in. I know some of our listeners are. But you are also training for a big tournament yourself. Tell us what you're training for and a little bit about how your training is going.
Sure. So I'm very much a goal-oriented person. When it comes to, say, fitness, if I'm just going to work out to get in shape, well, that's an arbitrary goal. What does that mean? What is shape? If I just want to lose some weight, well, you skip supper, you're going to weigh less in the morning. So I like to have a goal that I can out towards a distance that I can work towards and achieve. Regarding fitness, for me, for a long time, that was triathlon. I did finish 3 Ironman triathlons, and I've run 13 marathons. So having that goal out in the distance and making that public, making that commitment to that goal keeps me training when I don't want to get out of bed in the morning. So talking with my instructor about that goal and staying motivated, we came up with going to Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu Master Worlds in Las Vegas in August. And it's not just having that goal, but having that goal before me on a regular basis. Those of you who are friends of mine on Facebook, and I know, Joe, you make comments, and I appreciate that. I post on a regular basis. I have a countdown as to what I did today, and I may not post every day, but I just keep it fresh and keep it posted that this is how many days I've trained and this is what I have left to get to that goal. Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is tough. It really is. And being 50 years old, man, I wake up in the morning quite sore on a regular basis and tired. But having that goal out there to compete. Now, I don't expect that I'm going to win gold or maybe even stand on the medal stand, but my goal is to go there and be competitive in my first match, however that goes. And so that's what keeps me going to class. That's what keeps me doing the extra things. I lift 3 times a week. Training's going pretty good. Because of the shift I'm on right now, my on the mat training is a little bit limited to what it would be. But here, coming in April, I bid for a shift specifically that I could be at the gym 4 days a week, rolling at the school 4 days a week. And I'm on the right track. I'm where I need to be at the moment. I'm strong, I'm fit, I'm healthy. And that's where I need to be right now, having 170 days left until my competition.
Nice. So I think you touched a little bit on it. You said you're 50. Just specifically, what's your weight, age, and belt? What division are you going to be in?
Well, so I just came back from Miami, so I'm a little heavier. I'm actually running this morning as 135 pounds and 18% body fat, and I'm 6'6".
I hope you mean 235.
235 pounds and 6'6". But I want to go to the super heavyweight, so I got to get around, by August, I have to get down to around 214. You weigh in gi. So I'd be in the 50-year-olds, blue belts, 220 and under.
So are you allowing that you're going to cut weight for this? Or are you trying to be at the walking around at that weight?
No, but I have time. I want to cut weight the right way. I don't want to do the whole dehydration and not eating. I've got time. I figure I'll be down around, ideally, if things go as I plan, I'll be around 214, 8 to 9% body fat when I hit the mat.
Perfect. With your background of wrestling in school and running triathlons and stuff, you should have this pretty well dialed in. I think that's a good approach.
Well, I'm hoping to be competitive at least that first match.
Yeah, and I always tell people 50% of the people that enter a jiu-jitsu tournament lose their first match. That's just the math. So that keeps you from feeling bad if you lose it, but it also tells you you've got as much business winning that first match as anybody else.
And to make a reference to my triathlon days, Ironman training, an Ironman is a 2.4-mile swim, 112-mile bike, and then a 26.2-mile run. When you step up to that line, that's the icing on the cake, right? The cake is all the training and the physical improvements and the knowledge that you've gained in the time that you've trained before that. So stepping on that mat at Worlds is the icing on the cake. That's my goal. I got there. Look at all the work that I did and how much I've improved as an individual, my fitness, my skill level in jiu-jitsu by having that goal. Win or lose, when I step on that mat, I have won.
Nice. I would agree with that 100%. So we know you've competed in wrestling, triathlons. Have you done much grappling competition in recent history? Have you done some jiu-jitsu tournaments? Is it part of your one-year training? Or are you going to do some leading up to this?
Well, there's not a big jiu-jitsu community here, so I've competed in some local smaller tournaments. I am going to the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu Globetrotters Arizona training camp here at the end of the month for a week long of intensive rolling. And then there's a couple of bigger tournaments, one in Denver, possibly one in Fargo that I'm looking at to get that experience so that I am ready for Worlds, that I can say that I'm at the peak for that moment.
Nice. Do me a favor. I made a note. I'll try and remind you. Send me a text or something after you do that Globetrotters. I'm interested in how that works out. I've kind of followed those guys for a while, so let us know how that works out. Okay, so a one-year plan for a major competition from somebody who has competed quite a bit in different sports. Tell me a little bit about the plan. Did you have things kind of laid out from the beginning? Has it been an evolving plan? Tell me about that.
Sure. So there's some evolving, kind of laid out the plan, looked at work schedules, life schedules. I included my wife. My kids are all grown. I have 3 adult children now who are on their own. But I included my wife in the plan that I want to do this. So I kind of laid out, looked at when it was. That was part of choosing the goal and laid out what do I need to do to get there? What is my focus going to be? When I first started the plan, I wasn't where I wanted to be in physical condition. I was coming off night shift. I'd put on a bunch of weight. I started night shift. I was doing jiu-jitsu, running, and lifting. I just ran the Medtronics Marathon in Minneapolis. And I went to night shift, and I kind of lost all that. So the first, I broke it down into parts. What do I need to do? So this winter, my goal was to, let's keep our jiu-jitsu going, but let's get back in shape. Let's give us the foundation that will allow me to train hard at jiu-jitsu for 5-6 months. Because if you don't have that foundation and you go out and you're rolling hard on a nightly basis, you're going to end up hurt. You're going to end up injured. You're going to end up overtrained. So really my focus for the past 6 months has been to get my physical shape where I need to be to support the higher level jiu-jitsu training. And now going into the next phase, I'm going to tone down the lifting and do some easy, it's called MAF running, maximum aerobic fitness running, to improve my cardio and maintain those things but focus on my jiu-jitsu for the next 5-6 months.
Okay, I had that kind of as a question. I'm glad you touched on it. But what percentage of your training would you say during that first part was strength and conditioning versus BJJ, and now you're at a point where you're doing more jiu-jitsu, smart off the mat training? What's it look like going forward?
So it's kind of been, I would say it's a 60-40. So 60% of my training up to this point has been base training, the conditioning, the lifting, the flexibility, and then the 40% to keep improving, but also to keep some of those skills sharp. Now, starting in April, that's going to flip, where 40% is to maintain my physical conditioning, my strength, and my endurance, and then 60% is going to be on the mats, rolling, working technique, and focusing on sharpening those weapons, those tools.
Nice. Are you doing anything different nutritionally, or is that something that you just already have dialed in?
Well, nutrition's kind of a whole other topic. I believe one of the problems with our nutrition is that we try and fit everybody into the same cookie cutter, eat this, don't eat that. I actually train paleo. I eat paleo as my nutritional system, and so it's primarily a clean. I cook it, I prepare it from scratch, and it's primarily, meats with some vegetables, and I've been doing that for about 3 years.
Okay, now this is towards the end of the 1 year, and we're not there yet. But do you do any carbo loading or the week of a competition where you're changing your nutrition? Do you have any preparation for right before?
There's an old adage in racing, nothing new before race day. If you want to struggle and fail, then you change things up the week before your race.
Well, good enough. I believe that wholeheartedly with technique for sure, and I see how it makes sense with nutrition as well.
Stay the course. Stay what got you there to start with, right?
Yep, exactly. Last thing on this topic, as an older guy, how about work-rest cycle? Do you have that kind of pre-planned out? Are you just listening to your body? How do you know when to take a few days off and make sure that you're not overtraining?
Well, you have those. I have those built in. I have those built in to my schedule as to a rest day, or maybe I'll do yoga or some active recovery. But at the same time, you have to listen to your body. If you truly are beat up or you're injured, you maybe need to take a little rest. You need to take a little bit time. It doesn't mean you can't roll technique, but I think it's important to continue coming into the school. But once that timer goes off and they're at open mat or they're rolling hard, you maybe just step out. So it's something I planned in, but at the same time, I take it as I need it.
Yeah, and speaking of, when you're on the mats and maybe you're on the verge of being overtrained or feeling a little beat up, sometimes students are on the mats and they don't necessarily realize everything going on around them. So just a note to our listeners, you might not realize it's going on around you, but you can almost always ask to positionally spar and nobody's going to bat an eye about it. So if you're sort of halfway beat up and you're just like, hey, I want to work on pass and half guard or something, and you ask your opponent, your training partner to train that way, you're going to get a positive answer 90% of the time.
Right. Even at open mat, you go into open mat, there's going to be someone there who's maybe sitting out, just taking a breather, and you could say, hey, can I work my butterfly guard? Can I train some technique? They're going to be happy to do that with you.
Exactly. I said one more thing when I asked you that question, but I actually have one more thing. Tell me about, this is a 1 year challenge you gave yourself, and you've competed at a lot of different events. Is 1 year a good time frame for this level of competition? And also, you've been doing it long enough now. Are there any lessons learned? Have you thought, boy, I wish I would have done a little more of this or not spent as much time doing that?
I think a year is good. I think if lesson learned, it is to focus on the techniques that work for me. Some techniques just don't work for me, no matter how much I train for them. So I need to have solid technique that works for me, and maybe a little bit of knowledge of the other techniques. Being a taller guy, I gotta be honest, I am really not very good at leg locks. But I do have enough knowledge on leg locks to be able to defend against them. So focusing on the techniques that work for me and let some of the other ones go are important when it comes to training.
Yeah, I think that is a good key. Speaking of leg locks, at your division, which leg locks are going to be legal at this tournament? Do you know yet?
No,
have you looked at that? Okay.
It's IBJJF rules, so it's out there.
Okay. All right, perfect. Hey, Richard, I really appreciate your time. Thanks for submitting this article. I'm going to get it to Byron. We're going to get it up on our website. And good luck in the tournament. Anybody you want to give a shout out to before we go?
Joe Reeder. He's my instructor. He's been instrumental in helping me choose this goal and stay on this path. And I appreciate everything he does at the school and for law enforcement.
Awesome. Thanks, Richard. I really appreciate your time, man.
Have a good day.
All right. Thanks again, Richard. Appreciate you taking some time to share with us.
Yeah, that was great. And Gary and I have actually got to meet him, and he came down here to Wichita and trained with us, and he's quite the force. He wasn't joking. He's tall, and he is also strong. And the cool thing, besides kind of getting beat up over there by Richard, was he brought in my old high school wrestling coach, or junior high wrestling coach, Coach Kilmer, and it was like, it was kind of mind-blowing. Like, really? He goes, guess what I brought over here? And he pointed to Coach. I'm like, my wrestling coach is on the mat, or at jiu-jitsu with me, It's like, that's crazy. No, I wasn't a very good wrestler. We have talked about this before on the show too. But
what was your record, Byron?
I think I won a match in the whole
good
season.
Was it a forfeit?
I might have racked up a couple of other wins by forfeit that I don't even remember. But I think I actually won one match. But that's how it's tough to get into wrestling a little bit later and also suck at it.
Well,
I was a natural jiu-jitsu transition from being terrible at wrestler. No, I'm not even a natural jiu-jitsu transition. But anyway, it was just really cool to talk to him and to have him watch jiu-jitsu. And being a wrestling coach is quite a bit different than being in the jiu-jitsu room. And he called it like I pulled over. I have a guest here I'd like to talk to. So yes, we're training. Yes, we're doing jiu-jitsu, but midway through, I go over and sit with him because he's just sitting and watching. And I was like, "How you doing, Coach?" And we talk about, he knows my mom. We're just talking, and we're looking at the group. Half the class is like really getting after it and working hard. The other half of the class, maybe a little bit less, but there's a few groups that are kind of just chatting and hanging out and waiting to roll. We've all been there and seen that sort of thing. That's okay. And he goes, some of them are really training pretty hard, and some of them are just kind of hanging out. And I go, yeah, it's not like the wrestling room, is it? It's just it's different. But it's just like I was telling him, like, we're here. People are here for different reasons. Some of them are here just to relax after a hard day of work, and part of that relaxing is exercising. Part of it's social. Some of these guys are going to compete. We have professional MMA fighters in the gym. We have really top level grapplers, in our area, and like just people have different things that they're here for, and there's room for everybody on these mats. And he understood that because it's different with the wrestling program in school. If you can be chatting and talking and not training, you might as well be running sprints because that's what you're going to be doing next. So it was a different. He identified it, but it wasn't a problem. It's just a different culture. It's a different reason people are here, and I thought that was interesting talking to him about that. But yeah, that was really. Yep. It was fun to roll with Richard. It was really cool. He came through and he took us out to lunch, but he also brought my wrestling coach to class, and that was. I don't think I'll forget that. So, yep, glad you interviewed him, Joe, and you both did great on that, and it was interesting to learn for somebody with his experience, not just on the street, but also as a defensive tactics instructor as well.
Absolutely.
So we had gotten a while ago, we kind of did a lot of our articles of the week were about different sports and different things. We would do one about, tips for getting good at soccer, tips for, getting back on the field for football or whatever. And then we talk about it and bring it into jiu-jitsu. I was like, let's do that again. That was kind of interesting. So I found an article. It's 12 study tips to achieve your goals. And then, of course, they have the date on here in 2019. And then if you look up at the link, it's 2018.
So I'm looking at this and I'm thinking, if you haven't already achieved your goals in 2019,
that's awesome.
I don't care how much value you get out of this article, it's not going to help.
That's true. You kind of passed the. That's awesome. Oh, I didn't even think about that. But so your goals, the whole thing it's already over, like Joe called it. If your goals have an expiration date and you didn't get them, too bad. Okay, that was that article. Well, all right, guys. No, it does have some good tips, though.
Let's do it for 2020.
We'll just change the date on that. They have some different tips about studying and doing things. And one thing that they have is make a study plan. Plan out your studying, plan out your breaks, plan out your so jiu-jitsu, make a plan. Look at your week, look at your month, Richard's looking at his year as far as training goes. Plan it out. And so I'm going to go train gi on Tuesday, gi on Thursday, and Saturday is no gi. That's looking at my plan. So I need to be eating extra healthy or eating to set up a good training on those days for sure. I'm going to do on, I guess, Monday and Wednesday are my cardio days that I'm on the mat, and maybe Friday is weight day. I don't know what it is, but just plan it out, guys. It's going to go a lot more smoothly. And then also be, of course, ready to adjust the plan. If you have to work late on, one of the nights, maybe it's adjustable. Maybe it's just, hey, you missed that night, whatever. But if you're able to pick up a day here or there at the end of the week and get on the mat because you missed one, that's great. But make a plan. That way, it's just a more stable training environment.
I like number 3 there. Take regular study breaks.
You would like that one, Gary.
No, for me, I can roll for 4 hours straight. No need to take a break, take a water break. But when I'm learning in a classroom setting, in a seminar setting, I don't last that long. I have trouble at seminars. I need regular breaks. I need to just stop, go get a drink of water. If it's a longer seminar, I need a little break to grab something to eat. It just seems like when I come back, I'm more focused. When I'm really trying to concentrate, I do have trouble focusing for a while. So that one, taking a regular break every now and then really helps me out, really helps my learning, just makes me retain the information that much more. And, maybe I need to take a break and write some stuff down if I'm in a seminar or even class. I know a lot of places are big with journaling. You bring your journal right there to class and you write down to it, and definitely help you retain the information.
It's also nice at seminars when the instructor goes ahead and hands out notes. That helps. I wanted to make him Byron Jabara, who I'm sure stole it from Tim Sled.
That's true.
No, I wanted to make a more general comment on this. Looking at the website, this is geared for school, like 5th, 6th, 7th graders, junior high and high school kids. So
5th, 6th, 7th graders should be perfect for us.
It is. But the comment I was going to make is that I know for myself, and I suspect maybe for others too, if I approach jiu-jitsu more like an academic subject, I would probably progress a little quicker. Sometimes it's easy to just go class to class, and whatever you do in class, that's an individual class, and the next class is an individual class, and you don't always tie things together, and you don't always put in the study that you should when you're off the mats. And so I think just the whole idea of turning it into more of an academic pursuit is probably has potential to be beneficial for everybody.
Yeah, I think that's a really smart idea, Joe. And I know Byron has really embraced that. Actually next week, my father and I have to go meet with Byron for, a teacher,
Parent-teacher conference?
Parent-teacher conference. Sorry there. Couldn't think of it. Yeah,
You're getting older, Gary.
Byron,
Gary,
See, I told you I need a break, guys. I already forgot. See what happens if I try to concentrate?
Looking at the list here, number 8, collaborate with study partners. This is important for your jiu-jitsu. So if Gary's working on his takedowns, okay, he goes to class, the whole class isn't necessarily takedowns, whatever. So you come in, he warms up, they do an arm bars today, he rolls today, and maybe at the last roll they get to stand up. There's room for people to do takedowns. He does takedowns. But he's got to have a partner to collaborate with that he's kind of, as he would say, a partners in crime with, somebody who's going to stay extra 10 minutes, 15 minutes and work takedowns. Same thing if Joe wants to work with his heel hooks or whatever, get a couple of buddies and say, after class, let's drill these heel hooks. Let's see what we could come up with and tighten up our game here. Having that person to bounce those ideas off week after week or class after class, and maybe it's one person, maybe it's 3 or 4, whatever. But when you show up to class, you're like, oh, sweet, Joe's here. I'm going to get to do my extra training for heel hooks this time, whatever it is, getting that study partner is super valuable. And that doesn't need to be your coach. It doesn't need, if you're a blue belt, it doesn't need to be a purple belt. It could be another blue belt. It could even be a white belt. It just needs to be somebody who you're working with to both get better. You're partners in this. And I think that that's a super valuable tool to have to help you progress your jiu-jitsu, is just talk about it with somebody. Hopefully you need to get somebody. Maybe Gary is super interested in takedowns. I want to work triangle chokes. Okay, Gary's not the guy. He's not my study partner this month, or whatever it is. You need to find the right person, and then you work with them and you grow together. That's a big one.
Yeah, I like that. Just finding the right person. It's not necessarily has anything to do with belt ranking. Whoever in your gym is best at that particular skill set that you pick up, that's great.
We're just happy to help you too.
Absolutely.
I like to think of that. You're talking about collaborate with study partners, number 8 there. I like to call that the vanilla ice, just because our friend Mr. Ice said collaborate and listen, and that's what it reminds me of.
He also said you can't touch this.
That was MC Hammer.
Oh, that was MC Hammer. Damn it. I get my 80s rap.
Yep.
Another one. I like number.
Go ahead, Joe. I'll let you take it.
Okay, I was going to say I like number 5 as well, and it's test yourself. And this is coming from an academic standpoint. This article, and very rarely would you ever take a semester-long class and you just study, and then at the end of the class you have one big project or one big test. You do have a big project or a big test at the end of each class, but you generally have some checkpoints along the way. You have some quizzes, you have some tests on chapters or sections of the book or whatever you're studying, and then you have some confidence and you're prepared when you get to the final project or the final exam. And for all of us doing jiu-jitsu, I think we would recognize that demonstrating that I'm at a black belt level, that's not the final exam because there's still so much growth after that. But that would kind of be like your high school graduation. That's your final exam. You wouldn't go through 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th grade without taking any tests to get there. And I think it's important to test yourself along the way. Competition is a great way to do this. But I also find that I've always got one or two, I kind of refer to them as my yardstick training partners, where I might go 50% against somebody and go easy and work with somebody else, or somebody else might go easy with me because they're way better than me. But there's always one or two training partners that we go 85, 90% almost every time we train. It's not an ego thing, but we know we're kind of pushing each other and assessing where we're at. And so if you don't compete, that's a great way to do it. But I think you need to have some methods of testing yourself to see how you're doing, how you're coming along.
I like it, Joe. Definitely you need to test yourself. The one I really like, number 7, be positive. And I just like that for life, for everything. But while you're studying, just being positive is going to change your mindset. Focus your mind on positive outcomes, how you can use your own strengths to achieve them. And, when you think positively, the reward centers in your brain shows greater activity, making you feel less anxious, more open to new study tips, win-win for everybody. But positive, it goes back to our quote of the week. Let's just be positive. Big changes just come from that.
All right. Well, if you want more study tips from 2019, I'll put a link in the show notes and you can go check those out. They are pretty much timeless. I understand why somebody would put a date on an article like that just to make it seem like it's urgent. But yeah, what's up, Gary?
Yeah. Well, you think about if we could go back in time. I don't know how many of you guys know, but Byron failed 3rd grade 2 times, 5th grade once, 7th grade once, 9th grade twice, and he dropped out in 10th grade.
In fact, I'm getting ready to. I'm hoping to graduate soon.
At 20 years old, he was a 20-year-old 10th grader, and he finally pulled the plug.
Yeah, and you imagine what could have happened if you had these tips and podcasts back then? I mean, you would have probably made it to 10th or 11th grade before you dropped out at 25.
Man, if I can go back. So what I've been doing with my free time since I dropped out of school, so that's not super early, I guess. Since I dropped out of school, is I've been working on my flux capacitor, and I'm going to go back in time and undrop out of school, guys.
You should make a movie about that.
I feel like there's something there. I just got to get my DeLorean. Right now, it's the 2002 Corolla.
It's a Corolla.
It's got some neat little work. But you know what? It's pretty sweet.
That's what works.
Once that flux capacitor gets installed, and I can get up to 88 miles an hour downhill.
With the wind.
Yeah, a little bit of a tailwind. Maybe just jumping off of a jump, and then the speed going downhill my free fall. We'll get it there. Yeah. Anyway, we all have different goals, and mine is the flux capacitor in order to get me to go back in time to prevent me from making a major mistake. Not to do sports betting. That's not what I'm going to do. But there'll be some of that as well. But hey, I want to give a quick shout out to my new friends there in Lake Jackson at the School of Jiu-Jitsu. It was cool. Jake and I went down there. We did a couple seminars and got to hang out with Joe. That was a lot of fun, and really his Matt family there in Lake Jackson, and got to meet a lot of people. So hopefully they enjoyed it, and maybe there's a few more chokes going on down there in Lake Jackson.
Byron, what I really want to know though is how is the acai?
It's good stuff. Fernando. He has a business out of the jiu-jitsu gym selling acai, and what a cool idea. There's just like a lot of foot traffic coming in and out of there, right, Joe?
Oh yeah, there's somebody in there all the time, and waiters in and out of there picking it up and delivering it, and the gym's open all day long. So coach is encouraging people to come in since he's there anyway selling acai. If you can find a training partner and come in and do some drilling, the gym's open for that. And I think that's a great concept, and I'm looking forward to seeing some additional growth of some of our students taking advantage of that.
Yep. And guys, we're still doing the BJJ by the month. I want to give that a quick shout out. Go to Facebook.com. I shouldn't have to say that. Go to Facebook and type in BJJ by the month. We'll pop right up. We're all three in there, and we're just trying to part of it is to give you some guidance. If you need something to train on for this month and you hit the mats and you're just like, I don't have anything I'm working on, maybe you should do this. This month it's attacking the back, taking the back, attacking the back, all that good stuff. But really it's to help you get the idea of how to systemize your training and to have some focus for a little while in certain areas. And that's a great way to grow your jiu-jitsu. If you think you're in a plateau, focus on something. There's no plateau at all. It's just an illusion. Hey, I've had to do the same jiu-jitsu I would for 2 years straight. I haven't gotten any better. Okay, how about this? Start working on taking the back as much as possible. So, one sentence and you're done with your plateau. Okay, well, I suck at taking the back. Bingo. Like, that's pretty simple. Here's one. Work on your takedowns. Oh, I don't have, my takedowns are terrible. There's no plateau then. If you have terrible takedowns, you work on them for just a little while, you'll get better. You'll be a better grappler in almost no time. It's I don't know. It's a great way to keep your training going and keep improvement going at a measurable rate, really. And so every month we recommend, a certain topic or a certain area to train, but really do whatever you want. But that's what I'm doing. So this month I'm working on getting on the back, working on finishing with chokes, and keeping that dominant position until the job is done. That's what I'm doing. It's pretty fun.
Well, it's fun for you. It's not fun for me with you on my back, finishing the job.
Finishing the job. Why did I say that? Gotta get the tap, Gary. That sounds
okay.
And then I can put on a backwards tap out hat. I'm good to go. But also,
well, aren't you getting that tap out hat dry cleaned right now?
Yes, that's
the
reason.
Right now is
a bird pooped on my hat
with your pants and the hat on.
His bell-bottom pants, his tap-out T-shirt,
and his velour tracksuit.
Yeah.
Did you guys? Man, did I post that on Facebook on accident or what? You guys all know exactly what I did today. Real quick, if you want to support the podcast, the best way to do that is on Patreon. There'll be a link in the show notes to Patreon. I may add a 5-inch BjjBrick gi patch for a token of appreciation, and it really helps support the show. We're not a major podcast. You're not hearing a ton of ads. We're listener supported. People like you who want to help us out, and it really means a lot to us every time we get a new member of a Patreon team, and that could be you. Help us out, my friends. If this is something that you want to grow, get better, stick around, whatever, Patreon is a great way you could help out. But until then, even Patreon or not, I want you to do one thing. And then Gary's going to have a request, and Joe's going to have some advice. I want you to stay sweaty, my friends.
And don't forget to wash your hands thoroughly.
Oh.
Man, if I could give you all just one piece of advice, it would be this. Train hard, train smart, get better.
And that was definitely better than last week's train hard, train smart, get better. Joe, I can't live up to you. I tried to take your spot last week, but I guarantee you everybody is happy you're back to get the original tagline.
I thought you were going to say train in large plastic bags. That way you won't get any viruses.
Yeah, train for the coronavirus.
This is about the worst thing. As far as training jiu-jitsu, like, I feel like I'm definitely not a scientist, don't know anything about, viruses or any of that stuff, but like, jiu-jitsu is bad. if there's ever a big pandemic about, skin-to-skin contact or being in close proximity, it's going to, like, okay, it spread from jiu-jitsu gym to jiu-jitsu gym through tournament circuits. Like, oh, man. So stay off the mats unless you're healthy, guys. I'll say that much for sure.
Thank you for listening. I hope you find the time today to roll. After all, the best way to get better at Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is to do Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu.